gestation period of a cow is about 280 days. I make that reference not to remind your lordships that my first degree is agricultural science, but to reflect on the fact that most of the calves that will be born under this bill we are about to pass have already been conceived. As the noble Lord, the Earl of Devon, said, this is policy making on the hoof. If we think about a farmer who's deciding whether to plant a tree in a shelter belt, plant a new hedge, of course the time frame for seeing the returns on that are very much greater, well beyond even the planned 7-year phase-out of the basic payment system we expect to see in the forthcoming agriculture bill. Now, the decision to disapply CAP in the withdrawal agreement was probably unavoidable, but it has left our farmers in a state of great uncertainty, as we've heard from many of the other noble lords who are themselves farmers. Yes, they had promises that this would happen, but those are only words. And we have heard many words of reference to the members of the Lordship's House, but I doubt that anyone has yet consulted their removalist on the cost of moving their residents up to York. If the government had made progress on the agriculture bill in the last Parliament, stranded since November 2018, independent of its ideological content, the way in which our unreformed political system is simply not working. I also make another systemic point about the Rural Payments Agency, which a number of noble lords have referred to the delays in farmers receiving payments. Now, it saw its budget cut from $237 million in 2010 to $95 million in 2018. This is austerity, and maybe we hear talk about austerity lots in other contexts, but let's recognise this is a decision made across government that's had real consequences right across society. Now, this is a bill narrow in scope and duration, but I do want to take this opportunity to focus on the level of uncertainty that our farmers and growers are facing. Policy uncertainty, and of course, we've heard references to the weather this year, climate uncertainty, the uncertainty of what the climate emergency will bring them. Now, I'd like to thank the noble Lord, the Minister, for his response to my climate emergency will bring them. Now, I'd like to thank the noble Lord, the Minister, for his response to my written question number 541, which was about independent advice, public sector options. Now, I'm disappointed not to see in that answer a reference to farmer-led advice and research. Last year I was at the Oxford Real Farming Conference, and I heard a German minimum-till organic vegetable grower talking about how government-funded academics had come to his farm, were conducting research to answer the questions that he wanted answered, and then were providing him with advice based on that research. Now, the farmers and growers in that room gasped, and those were gasps of astonishment that government-funded research could work in that way, and I think perhaps gasps also of envy, because they'd like to see something similar. We've seen so much advice that farmers have had to rely on come from commercial interests based on commercial research of seed companies and of agrochemical companies. Facing this state of uncertainty, how much are we going to ensure that farmers are able to get the questions they need to get answered in the future 7 years and beyond? Now, I'm very aware of the narrow scope of the bill, but we are, of course, all looking forward to the agriculture bill. So I want to make 3 very brief points with regard to that and what we've seen of that thus far. I don't believe that we've seen anything like an understanding from the government of the need for the utter transformation of our agriculture, of our land use, that the climate emergency and our nature crisis demands, but also a social crisis that we'll get to. If we look at the Sustainable Development Goals and the UKSSD that looked at Britain's ability to meet those goals, we're not on track to meet any of them, and farming and land use is an important part of how we reach that goal. And That means we've had some reference to the food strategy. The food strategy needs to be absolutely integrated with the land use strategy. But we also need to be thinking about incomes policy, benefits and welfare, people being able to pay for the food they need so that farmers and growers get a decent return. That's part of agriculture policy. It's all interrelated. The control of the supermarkets is absolutely crucial. Food security. We need to think about feeding ourselves. That has to be the most basic requirement of government. Food quality. I heard an academic asked what's the answer to the kind of food we need and the kind of farming we need, said I can answer that in one word: vegetables. Only 18% of children in the UK eat their supposed 5 a day. Now that 5 a day recommendation was actually decided by the sociologists, not the nutritionists. The nutritionists will tell you it's 10 a day. That means, Your Lordship's House, I have to say we need to grow at least 8 times as much fruit and vegetables in the UK as we do now to head towards food self-sufficiency, healthy food self-sufficiency. And finally, this may be my most unpopular point. You might be surprised to hear that, but I'm sure most of Your Lordship's House would agree that we need to tackle food waste. Well, when we're thinking about our future agricultural policy, I put to you that feeding perfectly good food to animals in factory farming is food waste, and that has to stop. So, I want to come back in concluding to my point where I started in. The quality of governance, that we are racing just days before the absolute deadline to such a fundamental bill of security, is no way to run a government. A member of Your Lordship's House was commenting that they thought I was going to come back to democracy in every speech I make. It's probably just about true. I'd refer Your Lordships to a really excellent little book, Nation of Devils by Stein Ringen, that shows that countries with democratic proportional electoral systems